welcome to today's webinar, Smart Integration Technology for SugarCRM. My name is Glenn Johnson. I'm a Senior Vice President here at Magic Software Enterprises Americas, and I'm joined today by Senior Consultant Andy Bowie. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks, Glenn.
And welcome to all of you. We appreciate you joining us on today's webinar. It's a very exciting topic. SugarCRM is a very dynamic customer relationship management solution that's gaining popularity in the market today based on new features and capabilities as well as a long tradition of being a very open and usable CRM solution for businesses of all sizes. And so as a result, there's increasing attention being paid to how to integrate SugarCRM, to connect SugarCRM to other systems that you might have running in your business for the purpose of achieving overall smooth running business processes that extend even beyond the traditional customer relationship management sphere into other kinds of operational systems such as finance and accounting systems and your e-commerce shopping environments and so on. So today's webinar will focus on this topic, taking us towards a smart integration technology for SugarCRM, which we will demonstrate at the height of the webinar here today as a solution for your integration requirements for Sugar. And we are also going to take some time to talk about the various processes that you might want to integrate, how those integrate, as well as some of the overall integration considerations that are important when looking at software that's running in your environment, software that's running in the cloud, and so on. And so today's webinar is an open one in terms of your ability to ask questions, so please feel free to type those questions into the Q&A or the chat box. If you want the question to be sent privately, you can use chat. If you want everyone to see it, you can use the question box. That's just fine. And we are also just going to take a brief moment to explain the company that Andy and I work for. We have one slide today to mention that Magic Software Enterprises has been a provider of application development and integration platforms with 30 years of proven experience in enterprise software. We are traded on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol MGIC. We have over 1,000 employees worldwide and a lot of expertise in not only providing the innovative technology represented by our integration platform and application platform software, but also in dealing with the various enterprise systems that you may have in place. And in doing so, that has really created a technology culture here which is very much focused on business requirements of our customers and the need to serve the needs of the business organizations through the IT departments of our customers, and that's typically who we are working with in these organizations are the more technical people on staff whose responsibility is to support the business requirements of sales, marketing, manufacturing, operations, finance and accounting, and so on. So that is just a brief bit about Magic Software. We're broadcasting live from Southern California today. We have offices in about 10 countries around the world, and you can check on our website at www.magicsoftware.com for locations closest to you. If you have questions following the webinar, you can certainly go to our website or send us an email at info@magicsoftware.com. That will get to my attention. Or you can also just give us a phone call. In the U.S., we're at 949-250-1718, and we'll be happy to help you with whatever requirements you may have. So let's get right into the subject matter today. There's a lot of buzz out there, and buzz means buzzwords. I love this strip from Geek and Poke where the guy says, SOA, SCA, ESB, EDA, ESA, blah, blah, blah. And the guy says, great, and what about the ROI? And he responds, don't bother me with buzzwords, And that kind of seems sometimes the disconnect between IT and line of business and C-level at times is that we're speaking different languages, and we don't realize that there are buzzwords on both sides. There are certainly buzzwords in the business side of things, and there are definitely buzzwords in the technology arena. We'll be using both today, with apologies, but it's necessary to use some of the shorthand sometimes. And if you have questions, if some of it's not clear, by all means. Our purpose isn't to obfuscate. Our purpose is to clarify. So please feel free to ask those questions, and we'll be happy to try to fill in some of the blanks that we might accidentally leave by using too many acronyms in the course of today's webinar. Well, there are a number of integration scenarios that one can imagine where there is a need to have business processes that connect Sugar and your other enterprise software systems, whether that be an ERP system, a collaboration platform like SharePoint, an e-commerce environment, your product lifecycle management software, supply chain management software, logistics systems, human resource management systems, or HRIS as they're sometimes called. And across all these various systems, there are a number of different types of integration. I'll just highlight a few of them here. I think probably one of the most important ones is the opportunity to order conversion business process. Here we're suggesting that once an opportunity closes and has been tracked in SugarCRM to its ultimate sales success, then there is a need, obviously, to generate an actual order and to bill the customer. And that is the responsibility of your finance and accounting package, or your ERP system, as we like to fancily call them in enterprise software environments. And that process is something that can be managed by an integration platform, such as the one we'll be showing you today. Now, there are all kinds of other needs, though. One of the things that is very useful to CRM is data deduplication. We have leads that come in from all sorts of sources. People spell their names differently. They certainly spell company names differently. They use surrogate email addresses to kind of hide their identity, even though we have a better business email address for them already on file. Perhaps there's a need for disambiguating and deduplicating and appending information and checking information for accurate addresses, maybe through the National Change of Address database. So these are all kinds of business processes that require integration. They're usually supported by cloud-based services, and certainly the XPI integration platform can handle that very well for you. We'd be happy to talk to you about some of those options. Master item data synchronization is a huge requirement. The address and contact information in your CRM system is gold. It's valuable, and it also relates to the very same people with the same addresses and contact information as are recorded in your human resource management system, or as are recorded in your ERP system with your customer database. It might even have information related to your suppliers and so forth, depending upon how you're using Sugar. So all of the kind of address and contact information needs to be synchronized, and you need to develop business rules and procedures for doing that. And master item data synchronization is supported by the XPI integration platform for Sugar and the various systems out there. There are also, of course, very important master item databases related to products, your product catalog, pricing numbers, part numbers, etc. Not pricing numbers, prices and part numbers and descriptions and images and all kinds of things that relate to products. You also are going to have people using the CRM system that want to be able to see an order history that is contained elsewhere, that's in actually the ERP system is the system of record for those orders, isn't it? So visibility into the order history might be something that you want to manage and control. The e-commerce history is the same thing. Sometimes the e-commerce system is sort of detached from the centralized ERP and financial system, and they just kind of do general ledger entries to bring over. The transactions aren't actually brought in at the transaction level sometimes into the ERP system, but they exist in the e-commerce system. And in terms of a 360-degree view of the customer, that order history is important. Inventory status can be essential when a salesperson is on the phone talking to the customer, working their CRM in Sugar, and they are asked, is that available? Or they want to suggest a product offering. They need to know what's available so that that can be factored into the sales process. By the same token, you may want to know what is the credit status of this customer. What is their history? Can I add a note? Can I view the notes regarding credit situation with this particular client? Work orders might be something that need to be integrated. A lot of companies have custom sort of work order systems that can be well integrated here as well. Expense reporting. Our sales teams all generate expenses. If they travel, they're generating expenses. They need to report them. And having an integration between Sugar and your environment can be very helpful. And then, of course, a huge one, that's why I put the exclamation point, is mobile apps. Everyone today seems to want, a very specific kind of custom sort of, important mobile app that is going to be based on information that's in Sugar, and so that there are these moments where they can do things like, approve an order as a part of an order approval process. Maybe a sales manager needs that kind of capability, or simply to be able to look at a dashboard result for where do we stand in this particular territory for our sales results in this region and so forth. And so that kind of useful mobile app that are being asked for by the business side of the organization is often dependent upon information in terms of pipeline and forecast information and actual sales and that kind of thing that are in those back-end environments. And a lot of times you actually want to place an order on your tablet or place an order on your smartphone. Again, that requires some integration so that you have visibility of what's been going on in Sugar. So those are all possibilities as well. Well, if you go about doing your integration manually, and in other words, manually, I don't mean literally duplicating the data entry, although some companies are still doing that, and that's something you want to fix. But if you actually are writing a program to do it, I consider that to be a manual process as well. I mean, good grief, we are beyond the time period when you need to write software to integrate other software. It's already done for you. So if you do go in through that effort, think about all the enterprise systems you have. You're not just going to write one piece of software to do Sugar integration. You're going to have to write a program to integrate Sugar to each of the other systems that are out there. You don't want to do that. If you look at your entire enterprise, there's a formula here, and I'm not suggesting that if you have 10 enterprise systems, you're always going to need to integrate each one to each other. But you could have up to 45 just with 10 systems. A lot of companies have 30, 40, 50, 60 significant software systems that they're utilizing, and the numbers of integrations, if maintained manually, is really overwhelming, and it's a poor use of your programming team and the capabilities of any programmers that you may have on staff in your IT department. They're much better to focus on things that relate to your core business as opposed to tasks which are mundane and can be more easily managed through a higher level user interface and an integration platform. So to go about that, there are a number of architectures that are available. You could certainly think about using a bus architecture where you have web service calls typically that are taking place between the various applications, and that's certainly supported by things like the Magic XPI integration platform. I actually like hub and spoke architecture for integration. I think it tends to work most effectively. It's certainly highly scalable. It's more affordable and has a lot of advantages, and that's also supported by Magic. And what you'll often find is that there's some direct integration to your ERP and CRM and e-commerce systems through what I would consider like a bolt-on application, and then there's integration between those major systems, which typically goes through a hub and spoke, integration platform, which instead of being a bolt-on, it really has the advantage of being loosely coupled. And so with loosely coupled integration, gain this great advantage that you don't have to make changes to the integration every time you have an update to one of the systems. And so when something changes in the ERP system, you don't have to change things on the CRM side of your integration. That component just keeps on working. It's an object as opposed to something that is hardwired programmed. So that's an advantage of taking an integration platform approach. So if you're looking at integration in your environment, you want to assess your application portfolio. Look at how you're using Sugar with all the other systems that you have in place, and where those touch points might be, and where the business is really asking IT for a better solution, and also where you can discover operational inefficiencies and poor business processes, dropped business processes, and so forth, and fix those problems that are out there in the organization. So a good business analyst in the IT organization can serve the business extremely well by doing this analysis and saying, you know, where are our opportunities, like some of the ones that I discussed at the beginning. In considering how you will integrate, you need to think about you know, the types of integration that are taking place. Is user interaction dependent upon what's being integrated? Do we need this live kind of real-time responsiveness, or is this basically a background process? You know, something that is occurring more on a batch basis. Are we just viewing the information through an information request, or are we actually processing? Is there a transaction taking place here? Does it need to take place synchronously, keeping the communication open between both systems until the process is completed, or is it an asynchronous burst? I send the information and then I wait, and then I get a reply and I acknowledge, things like that. So if you have synchronous and asynchronous types of approaches, and of course all of these need to be supported. Is the process short-lived? Like we said, the user's waiting for a response, or is it long-running? You know, I put in a purchase order, it's flagged as being above $100,000, and so it goes into a queue or into an email or some such thing, awaiting approval from a vice president. Well, that's a long-running business process, because we don't know when that vice president is going to sit down at their desk or look at their mobile app or respond to that situation. And so we need to also build in alternate business processes in the integration platform that deal with those long-running scenarios of integration, so that if the maximum time period is exceeded, you could have an alert, you could have an alarm, you could have an escalation, so that the business process gets handled within acceptable time limits. And maybe if, you know, they fail to get the approval within a certain period of time, then maybe the process continues. Maybe that's your business rule. If the VP doesn't care enough to approve it within 48 hours, that's their problem. We're taking the order anyway. I mean, that's the way I do it at my company, but you know, you have to decide. Those are your business rules. And you also need to look at the geographic span. You know, obviously, most of you are running Sugar in the cloud. Some of you are running Sugar on premise, and some of you have multiple facilities, multiple data centers. You know, how will communication be maintained? What happens if we lose communication? You know, in the midst of a process. All of those things need to be looked at. Also, the question of business process reengineering. We're not just integrating data. We're not just pushing data back and forth. We actually have an opportunity as business analysts to re-engineer the business process, to improve it, to find things that we used to do because we just thought we had to that can actually be done better. And when you find those nuggets of business process improvement, they're very valuable. I can think of one organization which was a very large dental HMO, and they had been taking orders from people essentially where the consultant sits down and you know, says, okay, you know, these are the procedures that you need, and the person says, great, I want those procedures, and then they never come back to the dentist's office. They weren't following up. And so when IT discovered that there was this huge opportunity of just doing a better job of follow-up, they re-engineered the business process so that the system would proactively prompt people to get back in touch with those patients so that they could complete their dental work. And it literally was bringing in lots more revenue just because someone on IT said, you know what, we can automate an improvement to our existing business processes. Because right now, the customers, don't miss an appointment, don't come back, we're just letting it go. And there was a better way to handle that, obviously. When you're looking at your integration project, you need to consider an appropriate scope for that project. What we would suggest is starting with 1 or 2 business processes and not trying to do it all at once. Quick initial wins are going to get support and response from your business units so that you have the resources you need to continue bringing those excellent improvements to what's happening in your business environment. And people love sugar. I can guarantee you they really love sugar integrated. And it's just exciting to see how people respond to business process improvements that can take place when all your systems are really humming and working together. So to get there, you need to do a gap analysis. You need to look at, okay, what APIs do we have? What middleware do we have or do we need? What IT staff expertise do we currently have? Do we need to, hire a local consultant, or do we need to, work with the software vendor? What kind of resources are we going to need in order to get the project going so that when everything's live, it's just running smoothly? So those are all integration considerations that we would recommend to you. Now, when you're working with enterprise APIs, there are just so many different systems out there, which is excellent. But typically, the SaaS-based, cloud-based solutions have APIs that are based on either SOAP or RESTful web services. And we know with Sugar 7, for example, that RESTful web services are now in vogue with Sugar REST. But we used to have Sugar SOAP, and it's still available to us, and so that's also an option. But when we look at some of the, I hate to use the word older, but when we look at more traditional enterprise software, I guess, a lot of them have foundations that are based on technologies other than web services. And so you look at older versions of SAP, such as R3, and you're going to see interchange formats like BAPIs and ABAPs and IDOCs and RFCs and all of these. I told you we'd be using some buzzwords. All of these formats that really are not modern web services. Now, they obviously through NetWeaver, XIPI, whatever you want to call it, there are web service-based solutions there today as well for current versions. But in older versions, those don't exist. And so we really need to be able to work with a wide variety of integration methods in order to be assured that we have an approach that can work even with our proprietary software that we may have created ourselves. Does the integration platform have the ability to call Java objects? Does it have the ability to work with .NET? Does it work with compositing application logic, maybe from an IBM I system that's running RPG or COBOL or some existing systems such as that? I almost said the wrong thing there. I don't want to deprecate anything that's out there, but it's older, and for a lot of people in IT today, it's mysterious almost. But it certainly behooves you to have a system in place that has the flexibility to work with a wide variety of these various technologies. Now, in working with Sugar, of course, you're going to want to choose an integration platform that has a Sugar adapter, that software vendor has certified for use with Sugar. And you also, are going to want to make sure that that platform has other capabilities, other adapters, that it has the ability to work with web services, either SOAP or REST-based, that it can deal robustly with XML transformations, formatting, and transport, that, as I suggested just a moment ago, that it can composite application logic, that you can monitor directories even, for text files and things like that, so that you can work with information in whatever format it's available, from legacy environments, traditional environments, and even modern cloud-based SaaS environments. So the other capabilities of those systems that we'll be demonstrating today in our demonstration include business process modeling, the ability to visualize the business process, to orchestrate the business process, either real-time or asynchronously. Even scheduled batch jobs are possible, to do data mapping and transformation visually, to monitor your business processes, and to do it in a way that is secure, that is scalable, that is compliant with service-oriented architecture principles, and of course in a way that can integrate with mobile apps, including having companion technology for actually building new mobile apps that can enhance the business processes that you're experiencing in your Sugar environment. All of that is part of what is delivered by Magic Software's technology platforms, and we're very excited about it. Now, in doing so, one of the key issues can be of high availability, backup. What happens if communications fail, if a process fails, if a hard drive goes out, processors go out, whatever. You want to have high availability. You also want to be able to scale and not have to rewrite your business processes. What happens if your business grows? That's the objective, right? So if you have a 10-fold increase in transactions or a 100-fold increase in transactions, will your system keep up? If it's a 1,000-fold, 10,000-fold, will your system keep up? And with the technology of in-memory computing, you have the opportunity to create in-memory data grids. And the in-memory data grid is very powerful in that it allocates a space, which is a co-location of memory and processing in a grid. You can visualize it in your head as a grid. And what that really provides you is a virtualization of all of this parallel processing capability for scale. So you simply apply and utilize more hardware, either physically in that environment or virtually. And you can also then achieve that redundancy that you're looking for by having more of these spaces available to pick up where a failed space may have left off because of some processing error. Now, the persistency of information is something that used to be a part of transaction. So part of speeding things up in memory comes from our the reliability of memory that simply wasn't there before, and the increased reliability of memory because of the fact that you have a grid that where everything is backed up, so that there's a failover environment essentially for each little minute process that's executing. So that right behind then becomes very powerful, because what you can do is reduce the transaction time by eliminating the writing to the database from the transaction time. Let's explain that. So if you look at the traditional tier-based architecture that business processes use today, the final step is writing the results of the transaction to the database and recording that. Now, that is probably the most time-consuming aspect of that business process, because what you're doing is accessing a physical disk, and disk access time takes much more time than obviously the things that you were doing in memory in order to do the processing. So when we know that that memory is perfectly reliable and is has high availability due to the backup on the grid, then what we can do is say, you know what, that isn't really part of the transaction time. So we can provide our reply, our response before we've recorded the result to disk. The result has been recorded in memory, but it hasn't been recorded to disk yet. That actually means that all of these parallel processes that are executing in a shorter amount of time as well. And the recording to the database becomes an archival step, somewhat like tape backup was in the past, as opposed to being a part of the transaction where we couldn't say I'm done until we actually had recorded it to disk. Now we can. Now we have the assurance that of that Six Sigma reliability, that we don't need to worry about whether or not it's been recorded to the database yet. That will happen after the fact. We can be assured of that. So we move on, and the transaction times are even faster. So that ability to use right behind not only provides us with the persistency, but it provides us with faster transaction times, and that gets us to even greater scalability and high availability. The dynamic scaling of an in-memory data grid approach means that we have linear scalability, so we can do all the load balancing, the elastic provisioning that's needed. That creates the high performance, and it also creates the hot backup environment that's required in order to have high availability. And so we kind of have the best of both worlds in terms of performance and reliability in this integration platform. And so in-memory computing has really revolutionized the scalability and reliability of integration processes to that Six Sigma level even from where they were before. Now, from a security standpoint, the integration is always something that you want to look very closely at. Obviously, the Magic XPI integration platform can be installed in a private cloud. It can be installed on-premise. And typically, people are installing it on-premise behind the firewall with their other protected systems, ERP, e-commerce, supply chain management, and so on. All of those reach out into the internet and the web at various times, but typically sit behind the firewall. And such is the case as well with the Magic XPI integration platform. Now, Sugar is most commonly deployed in the cloud, of course, and so that is a very secure environment, and you have the certifications and assurances for that from SugarCRM. But the point here is that by deploying behind the firewall, your IT auditors have that great assurance that all the integration processes are taking place in the right physical environment. And if you do it in the cloud, then you want to make sure you've got a firewall in that cloud for that very same purpose, right? So there's a data center security approach that you need to factor into how you're doing things. You also want to make sure that you use the encryption and decryption of your integration platform. So Magic XPI provides all of these various cipher formats so that you can choose the different encryption and decryption modes. And depending upon the level of security required, these various options will give you a higher degree of uncrackability. I don't think that's a word, but I just made it up. And also, they have a performance consideration associated to them as well. Now, the audit capability is very important in Magic XPI, and that gives you an added dimension of security, particularly transactional security from an audit trail standpoint. The monitor in XPI is configurable. You can determine what information gets recorded about each integration process that's executing. You can decide about having attachments, so you can actually archive what information was sent from one system to another. So you have a record of that, and that's all recorded into a standard database. So you have easy access to the monitor and to the information in the monitor, providing that additional element of security. So Magic Software is offering the Magic XPI integration platform, which gives you the connectivity between all of your software systems and processes, and the Magic XPA application platform, which gives you the ability to build those mobile apps and other kinds of applications that you might also need in your environment. These are both metadata-driven solutions, which are excellent in terms of taking advantage of the platform so that you really just focus on the business logic of the process involved and not having to worry about line-by-line coding or programming. They also have an expression editor in common between the two so that when you're learning a syntax for integration and your applications, you learn it once. You don't have to learn two different things, so it just makes it all easier. So that is really how that metadata-driven commonality tends to come into play there. So the Magic XPI integration platform has obviously the Sugar adapter. It also has adapters for other enterprise software and a whole slew of services and wizards and database connectors and messaging connectivity adapters and all sorts of technical level components as well that give you the ability to work with almost any API or any piece of software that has been created that wasn't created intentionally to be a black box, to be hardened and encrypted. If they did that, obviously, that more power to them. We're not going to crack it for you. We're not hacking in that way, but we're providing the integration to open systems, to systems that were designed to have a flat file interface or a database interface or a messaging interface or a service call of some kind component, objects and components, whatever it is. We're working with those kinds of integration. The power of the mobile integration is that when you use Magic XPA and it's integrated to your SugarCRM, you can actually build a mobile app that deploys to any environment. So Android, Apple, Windows, BlackBerry. We have options for all of that you can look at, and you don't have to learn separate languages for all of those environments. The server side of your mobile application is also done in the same application platform. Really simplifies things, and you can do that on your own in your IT department, or you can simply talk to a Magic partner or Magic Professional Services who can help you to build those apps that might extend the business functionality in your environment. So let's talk specifically, before I hand it over here to Andy, on SugarCRM integration. You're able to select your modules in Sugar. You're able to choose which operation you want to engage on those: query, create, update, delete. You're able to set parameters. What return fields do you want on a query operation? What is the batch size, the results per chunk? What kind of results are you looking for? You want it in a file? You want to store it in variables? Do you want to split into multiple files? And there are several options for doing that. Also, there's some additional capabilities like being able to add an attachment to a note in Sugar, to be able to get the Sugar user ID, the Sugar server info, to add revisions to existing documents, and very importantly, to be able to refresh the XSD so that any changes which are taking place in the Sugar environment, customizations and so forth, are all pulled into the integration environment, so that when you do the data mapping, the things that Andy's going to show us right now, it's all there. It's already available to you. So what I want to do now is pass the ball over to Andy so that he can demonstrate this integration environment to us. And he should have control now. We're seeing his desktop, so I'm going to invite Andy to begin the demonstration. Thank you, Andy.
All right, thank you, Glenn. So this is the demonstration part of the webinar for today, and what I'd like to do is actually go over the XPI Studio and go over the project kind of briefly and on a high-level scale, and show you what to expect during today's demonstration. Just as an overview, today's demonstration, we're going to be creating a new account in our SugarCRM server, and our XPI project is going to catch that a new account was created, and it's going to go ahead and add that account into our JDE system. So the first thing I'd like to point out is on your screen you can see our XPI Studio, and currently we have our project open. Now right off the bat you can see that this isn't the typical coding methodology that some of you may be used to. Here at Magic, especially with Magic XPI, we promote the drag, drop, and configure methodology for our projects. As Glenn mentioned, our platforms have very little actual line-by-line coding within them, which kind of helps us turn around and get projects, develop projects in a quicker sense. So one of the things I wanted to go ahead and point out is here under the flow panel, this is where this is the flow of our logic. This is what components are being called, and our components are called in a top to bottom, left to right fashion. Currently there's only one direction for the flow, and basically what you're looking at is we're looking at the flow that's checking to see if a new Sugar account was created. Now this green area is our trigger area, and basically any components dragged into here are trigger specific components. And there's several that we've added. Right now we're using a scheduler service, which basically means every 15 seconds we're going to be calling this flow. There's other triggers that we can use, whether it be a directory scanner, which will allow us to listen in on a directory on our server, or even an FTP server, and check for new files. If a file with a specific name or a designated extension is added into the directory, then the flow is activated during whatever interval timer we set to it, and it'll process the file from there. We also have a SugarCRM trigger, Salesforce trigger, JDE, basically our CRM triggers, which can listen in on many other features, whether it be an update is performed, a creation is performed, or a deletion is performed. So let's go ahead and take a look at the project at hand. And basically what we're doing is every 15 seconds we're checking our SugarCRM server and checking for a new account. So here's my SugarCRM server, and I'm going to go ahead and click on my configuration tab. And as Glenn mentioned, there's several operations that our SugarCRM component supports. We have query, create, update, and delete. Now, since we're simply just browsing to see if a new account was created, we're performing a query. And as I mentioned, we're browsing on the accounts. These are all the objects from our Sugar server. So this accesses our server directly. If I click reload, it's going to go ahead and call our SugarCRM server. And it's actually going to update whatever is in my modules list. So here, this is a real-time list of all the modules I have in my SugarCRM server. I'm going to go ahead and click Accounts. I'll go ahead and cancel for now, just so I don't mess anything up. Clicking OK, we are pulled to my data mapper. Now, in the data mapper, since we're querying, this is where we're putting in basically our quote-unquote where clause of our query. We've created a user-defined field in our system, and it's called in JDE. And this is basically what we're checking for. We're checking to see if this account has been integrated to JDE yet. If not, then this account will be flagged, and it'll be outputted into I believe, a XML file. So here we're storing our results in our c.sugarXML variable. Okay, so now if an account is found, we're actually going to go ahead and perform a call flow, which we'll call our next flow, which is inserting into our JDE server. So here we're pulling in our JDE server. This is our JDE component, and as you can see, it's the same type of configuration as SugarCRM. We drag the component communicates with our JDE server and pulls in whatever module names or business functions are within that server. If I go ahead and browse this list, it's currently communicating with our JDE server to pull in all of the context and all of the modules that are on that server. So I'm no JDE expert, but if I were just to go into the inventory module, perform the get, we can see all the business functions that are associated with this CINV module. As I mentioned, you don't need to be a JDE expert per se. You just need to know which module you need to call for whatever functionality you're trying to achieve with your integration project. So after clicking OK, here we have our source and destination. We're going to be pulling up another data mapper again. And basically what I'm doing on this step is saying that we're going to be taking the XML that we populated, which is our SugarXML, and we're going to be mapping to our JDE server. So now if I go ahead and expand both columns, we can see that we're just simply mapping to our designated field. So from SugarCRM, we have our office number going to our phone number 1, billing address street going to our address line 1, et cetera, et cetera. And just like that, that's how we integrate from Sugar to JDE. Now, to prevent an infinite loop, of course, we need to update the JDE flag within our SugarCRM account. And now we're calling our SugarCRM, we created a new SugarCRM component, and instead of just querying this time, we're obviously going to update. And if I go into my update, we're going to go ahead and see that we are updating the in JDE flag with true, or I believe yes in this case. So yes. All right. So that's basically the project. Let's go ahead and see it in action. Here I have both my SugarCRM interface as well as my JDE interface. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new account. We'll go ahead and call this Andy Sugar CRM. Office phone, I'll go ahead and put our office phone here at Magic, 949-250-1718, and I'll go ahead and input our office location. Now, you will notice that I'm skipping a couple of fields. Obviously, in the demonstration, we've only mapped several fields to JDE, so only a few of them will be pulled in. The others will be disregarded. Of course, this is just for demonstration purposes. If you need to integrate and map over other fields, as you can recall, when I opened up that data mapper, we skipped a lot of the fields. So let's just punch in the number here again, 1718. All right, and I believe that's all the fields that we need. Here's our user-defined field JDE address book, and as soon as the account is processed, it'll update this JDE address book field with its JDE address book number. So let's go ahead and click Save. Wait for that to finish. All right. And now all we need to do is wait the 15 seconds for the server to, our XPI server to go ahead and process and activate that flow. I'll go ahead and perform a refresh to see if it's been processed yet. We might have caught the server right as it finished the 15-second ping, so now here we go. So on that refresh, we were able to get a JDE address book number. Now if I go ahead and copy this number and paste it into my my JDE server and click Find, we'll go ahead and see Andy SugarCRM. And if we go ahead and browse this account, we can see that the name was inputted. And if I go into my mailing address, we can see that the office location was in fact inputted. All right, so that's basically the demonstration. Let's jump back into the studio for a little bit and go over a little bit lower level and go into what XPI has to offer. So as you can see, we're accessing two systems here in our project. And one of the things that XPI likes to address is the maintainability of projects on a long-term scale. Although it's easy, quote-unquote, easy to code projects in our XPI suite, what happens when we want to move from, say, a development to a production environment, or say our credentials are forced to change. Maybe our password policy requires us to change credentials every 3 months. Now, instead of having to go through every single maybe SugarCRM or JDE reference and having to go through and change all the credentials each and every step, this could become tedious for larger scale projects. So how does XPI handle this? Now, as you can see under the settings, right now I'm parked on my JDE component. Under the settings, you can see server name, username, and password. However, this information wasn't manually inputted by the programmer. It's actually being pulled in from this resource name. Same thing if I go to our SugarCRM component. We have a resource name that's inputting our credentials and server details. If I go ahead and go to my resources repository, I can actually see and edit these settings. So here, if I change my username, I'll change it here. So of course, a lot of solutions will provide this same. It's kind of a basic concept, so that to make sure the transition from moving or updating the project is smooth and hassle-free. But what XPI also allows us to do is we're actually able, suppose I wanted to develop a new project that would use these accounts as well. And suppose that we had more than just 2 systems in our project. Suppose we had 8 systems. Maybe we had a SharePoint reference in there as well as a Salesforce reference. What we can do is we can actually save or export our resources as an XML file and go ahead and import them as well into our projects. So here I'm just in my resource repository. If I click load, I can go ahead and overwrite or append, and I'll go ahead and designate my resources.xml, and here I can select which resources I'd like to import. Now, with this methodology, we also promote this for our projects as well. Suppose we wanted to add this address book from SugarCRM to JDE within another project. Instead of having to reprogram or copy these flows over into the other project, we can go ahead and export these flows and import them as well. Of course, there will be some reconfiguration, a little bit, making most of the time the resources aren't the same name, etc. But this just goes to show that we can kind of interchange and pull from one project and compile a new project, just to keep kind of the drag, drop, configure methodology true. Okay, and on top of that, there's also a services repository where here we're calling our SugarCRM web service. Suppose you wanted to create an HTTP service. XPI also handles handles creating these services. Sorry. All right, and that's basically all I have for the demonstration today. Glenn, did you want to go ahead and open up the floor for questions?
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Andy. Fantastic job there. And we'll invite you to enter your questions into the chat box and send them to the host and presenter. We'll be happy to take them as they come in. Then please, you can also use the question box if that's easier for you. So we will give you just a second to get those questions entered in. While we're waiting for you to enter in those questions, just a reminder that you can reach further information about Magic Software at our website, www.magicsoftware.com, or send an information request to info@magicsoftware.com, or give us a call at 949-250-1718. Okay, the first question that's in is, do you integrate with Sage? Yeah, we have customers that utilize Sage ERP systems, Sage X3, for example, and we have implementations of that. Here's another question. Can you work with nested XML, and how large? Andy, I'll let you.
Yes, we do work with nested XMLs. We have worked with projects where we had recursive XMLs as well. That would be so when we reference an XML. Let me go ahead and open up the our data mapper. If we're referencing or sourcing an XML, there's an option to point to our schema file or whichever schema you'll be using. Since we're using components that are that have already been pre-programmed, such as like JDE or SugarCRM, it has its own official schema. But as long as you have the schema file, the data mapper can read the XML and we can process it however.
Okay. Another question. How is this different from Oracle Fusion Middleware? I guess I'll take that one. Basically, the purpose is the same, that the Fusion Middleware, which is actually a collection of about, I'd say, 30 different products, and Magic XPI integration platform. Probably the advantage or the difference, the main difference is that Magic XPI integration platform is a single middleware solution, so that there's not as much to learn, there aren't as many moving parts to Magic XPI. It was all developed from one company as opposed to a collection of different middleware products that were acquired through the merger process. So obviously, in a large enterprise, Oracle Fusion Middleware can be a very effective solution. We're not bad-mouthing it. We're just describing differences. So you really have a more succinct environment from a studio and design standpoint with Magic XPI. And then, of course, we do have the in-memory computing, in-memory data grid that would differentiate us from the bulk of the Oracle Fusion Middleware products as well. So those are two things that we would suggest. Other question here is, what about Syspro? Yeah, we have Syspro customers as well that are integrating using Magic XPI integration platform, and those are basically accomplished via web services, much in the same regard that the API for Sugar is exposing web services as well. I don't see any other questions coming in, Andy, so I want to thank you for your demonstration again and for participating in today's webinar.
All right, no problem, Glenn.
Hey, and thanks to all of you for participating as well. We do very much appreciate your being on our webinar today, and we would invite you to look for future webinars on the Magic Software website under News and Events. You can look at the live webinar link there. And again, feel free to contact us at info@magicsoftware.com or give us a call at 949-250-1718. If you're outside of the U.S. and Canada, you can check for local offices on the Magic Software website. We look forward to hearing from you again very soon. Thanks for being with us today.
All right, thanks, Glenn.